So I'm answering a question here from Daniel Louis Abro Fernandez, and this is a question right at the end of a bigger comment that was left on a video where I had clearly mentioned something, which is something I've taught in many places, but I've never taught explicitly. I've never mentioned explicitly in a video in and of itself. It's the idea of black path versus white path in self-development, two paths in the world of self-development. And that largely, if you look at all self-development material, you can put it in one of those two camps, black path or white path. So Daniel's asking me about this is because I'd obviously referenced it in that video. The video was NLP reframing, does it actually work? So I'll link that around. But I couldn't find the video myself because black path and white path was not in the title, so I don't know what I'm referring to there. I'm making this video now. Black path versus white path in self-development. So essentially, if you look at the world of self-development, and by that I mean anything where you go, right, I'm looking for some technology, some ideas, some skills, some understandings that I can incorporate into who I am and how I am, that will change my experience of life and possibly my results that I get through my engagement with the world as well. And there are largely two paths that you find out there. The black path, which is the path of death, and the white path, which is the path of life. Now, on hearing this, a lot of people might go, well, I don't like the sound of that path of death. I like the sound of the path of life. This isn't death as in some doom and gloom, kind of the end of everything. It's really the death of the ego. And it's the death of old ideas that have held you back in life, that you never question the truth of, okay? It's the death of clinging on to thoughts as facts. And it's incredibly liberating, because when the ego dies and when so many of the ideas that have held us back in life die, when we start to see them for what they are, which is not facts about the world, which is not truths about ourselves, as simply ideas, okay? Not necessarily to be taken too seriously. We become liberated. So the death of the ego leads to liberation. In the Tarot de Marseille, if you look at the 13th card in the major arcana, which is death, it is followed by temperance. And temperance is represented in that image by a woman with two jars, and there's a flow occurring, a free flow occurring between these two jars that can represent opposites. And for me, the message in that is that the liberation of death, the death of the ego, once we're no longer holding on, we're not struggling against imagined forces in our lives, our inner flow can drop into equilibrium. We become much more alive, much more fluid, much more dynamic. Water represents life, the fluidity there. Fluidity represents movement. That which is alive moves. So we become more alive through death, in that sense, the death of the ego. So looking at black path self-development stuff, big black path elements in Buddhism, big black path elements in Stoicism, in Byron Katie's The Work. Look at that. That's all about dismantling ideas of limitation, rules about what should and shouldn't be. It's freeing. It's liberating. Look at the three principles, more black path. There are countless other examples I could draw on. Sherry Huber, modern Zen teacher, black path stuff going on there. The white path stuff, the path of life, this is about living into these ideas, allowing ideas to come alive. And it's also very much about, white path stuff is about creating results in the world. It's not questioning the nature of reality and freeing ourselves from our limiting structures so much as putting new structures and new ways of engagement in place that enable us to get the results that we want in life. Okay, get the experience that we want in life. It's about creating the results and the experiences that we want. That's what white path development stuff is about. Black path frees us from that which has been holding us back. White path empowers us to create what we want. Now, You could equally call these the yin path and the yang path. If we evoke the Tai Chi symbol, the yin yang symbol, the yin and the yang interplay between the two flowing into each other. At the core of yin yang philosophy is that the interplay of opposites is profoundly generative. It's what creates. So we often side with one side of a yin-yang dynamic and go, this is good, that's bad. But actually we need the interplay of both, the light, the darkness, the up, the down, the in, the out, life, death, male, female. As Heraclitus said, pre-Socratic Greek philosopher, I don't know when, in about 500 BC or something, the world consists in the flux of opposites, the interplay of opposites. So we need both. Now here's the thing, this is what's relevant when it comes to self-development. A lot of people, they get really hung up on the black path stuff, and they don't get hung up on it. They get so much benefit from it, they get so much liberation from it, they get so much freedom from it, they absolutely love it. Now there's a great story from Eckhart Tolle. He says when he awoke from his old illusions, he spent the next 2 years doing almost nothing but sitting on a park bench. Okay, he didn't do anything anymore. Didn't really engage, didn't really create, just sat there feeling good, nothing happened. Beautiful description of all black path, no white path. Right? If you ever read the work of Antonio Damasio, particularly The Feeling of What Happens I'm referencing here, he talks about the autobiographical self, and he points out that people who have a brain injury that destroys the part of the brain where their autobiographical self, their stories about who they are, their ego, in that more Eastern use of the word rather than Eastern philosophy rendering of the word than the Freudian rendering or the Jungian rendering, but that ego, when there's some brain damage that affects that and takes that offline, people can still sort of do the things they could do before. If they could play piano, they could play piano still. They could even kind of make a sandwich if you put the sandwich making materials in their hands, but they can't really look after themselves. They don't have any direction in life. They can't make decisions. They can't think forward into the future. They don't create into the world. They just maybe react in the moment according to whatever. And if they don't have people looking after them, they rapidly go into a state of decline in life. So black path stuff is incredibly liberating, but it's not necessarily very functional for living in the modern world and creating results. Not necessarily in and of itself. Now I'm aware that there'll be devotees of the black path stuff. People who's the guy that wrote the book, The Finders, Jeffrey something? Who'll say, no, this is the answer. Or people who are Three Principles devotees who believe that that's the one solution. The truth is it can seem the one solution because it's so liberating, but people never really let go completely of their ego, so they still have that ability to engage and create. But those who really truly transcended it, for most people, if you really truly transcended your ego and you didn't operate through any ego structures, you really probably wouldn't live very long or certainly have any capacity to create much intentionally in the world. So the death of the ego can be incredibly restricting, but it's also, our egos are, in a sense, they are the sense we make of ourselves in order to make sense of ourselves in the world. They are our map that dictates how we engage, what's possible, what's not for us. White path approaches are much more interested in recreating that map. Okay, or at least the more sophisticated white path approaches are. Less sophisticated white path approaches to self-development are more interested in strategies and tactics for how to make what you want happen out there in the world. So if we look at NLP, for example, which I've just done another video on where I mentioned, you could look at influential language patterns, right? That's about having a skill to influence others. It's got nothing to do with changing your rendering of yourself inside here. It's about taking all that you believe to be true and going, well, it is true that I need to influence that person, so I need the good skills to do it. Okay, no questioning. So like when you get super pure white path stuff, it's obviously quite superficial in some ways. And not to say it's not valuable, learning those skills is immensely valuable. More sophisticated white path stuff starts to recognize, hang on, I only ever engage with the world from where I am at in myself and in my being. So when I recreate that, I'm going to recreate my engagement with the world and automatically recreate my results. This is more sophisticated white path stuff. However, and this is where people start to use affirmations, right? But what they're trying to do is they're trying to do pure white path with no black path, and they end up in an internal debate within their unconscious mind about what is or isn't so. This is why I would say to you, if you're watching this and you are looking to create your life from the inside out, right? You're looking to up your capacity to create good things in your life and in the world, for yourself, for the people who are important to you. You want to recognize this yin-yang relationship between black path and white path. Because you cannot transform yourself from the inside out on a white path approach effectively if you are still believing that ideas are facts, that thoughts are truths. If you're still believing that, you cannot be truly free to create with those, you see, because you cannot change facts. You cannot change facts. So if you're unconsciously battling with facts, what I call arguing about what is or isn't so, because you're still caught in what I call the truth trap, believing certain thoughts and ideas to be true, unquestionably, obviously they're true. If you cannot step back from your own renderings of the world and see them for what they are, i.e. ideas, thoughts, concepts, metaphors, not reality itself. If you haven't done that black path stuff, you can't be truly free to remold the clay of your own ego and psyche and all of that, because you're always struggling against truth and fact and all of that kind of thing. Okay? So you need a good dose of the black path stuff to free yourself to be truly adept at the white path stuff. But here's the thing. In a sense, there is no black path, right? In a sense, there really is no transcending the ego. There's only remapping the ego so that it sees itself for what it is. The only way you can really transcend your ego, I think, is temporarily, probably through the odd strange enlightenment experience, or through entheogenic drugs, or through permanently, possibly through brain damage. But living in a state of no ego is so dysfunctional, it just doesn't work. So what most people who are quote unquote enlightened are, and this is a black path thing, enlightened, waking up from the illusions, they haven't really transcended their ego. All they've done is they've created a new ego, or a new rendering of ego, that is able to see itself for what it is, ego. Okay, so they create a new map that includes themselves as the map maker. So it's more like an ego upgrade. What looks like black path is actually kind of white path in disguise. And this is the thing, this is why I say it's yin and yang, because if you look at the yin yang symbol, they interplay, but inside of the white, inside of the yang is a little bit of yin, and inside of the black, inside of the yin is a little bit of yang. Okay? And really, what that's representing in static form is something a lot more dynamic. That would be a moving image, and there would be a yin-yang within a yin-yang within a yin-yang within a yin-yang. Infinite regress, infinite unfolding. So the truth is there is no pure white path and there is no pure black path. There are just leanings. The truth is, if you are looking to transform yourself from the inside out, transform the results that you habitually get in life, you want to explore both black path and white path. And probably it's going to run like this. Spend some time in one or the other. Probably doesn't matter where you start. Make the gains that you make. When you start to get into diminishing returns, you flip to the other. So if you get into white path to start with, you make some rapid gains. This is what I did, got into white path stuff to start with, made huge gains, transformed so much, and then I started to get into the realm of diminishing returns. So I flipped into black path development, made huge gains, then started to get into the realm of diminishing returns. Then flipped back to white path again. Now it's infused with all that I got from the black path journey. So I'm now back in the high yield. I'm making new ground fast. We're going back to white path. So speaking for myself, what I do is when I find myself becoming too yang, too white path, because one of the elements of white path is somewhat holding on, often to outcomes. Can end up holding on too tight when we do too much white path. And when I find myself becoming too yang in that, holding on too much, I will toggle into black path development again. And when I find myself holding too loose to life and the world, I'll toggle back into white path again. But every time that I enfold, I bring a bit more of the other in. So it's like it's said, and I don't know if this is true, but the katana, the Japanese sword, it needs to have the right combination of solidity and hardness for the cutting edge, but enough flexibility so the blade won't shatter. And the Japanese sword masters beat out and fold the steel literally thousands of times. And every time they enfold, they're enfolding opposites in. Hardness gets folded into softness, softness into hardness. And you end up with this finely tempered blade. So when you are finely tempering the blade of who you are and how you are and your engagements with the world, understanding black path and white path and understanding how to fold those opposites in is a really useful thing.